You can remove the word Trump from it. You got a completely different person there.
The US president is a big deal because what he does affects multi-countries, and Canada, of course, as our biggest trading partner, really affects us. The one thing we know about the A team that Trump's got, they execute. They pull shit off. Canada has to get behind the entrepreneur, the small, medium enterprises. We need to get productive again. Trudeau's off the table for Trump. He has no respect for him. We are 100% going to pay a price for that. We'll just see how much damage.
Where do we want to start today's show? Do we want to talk about the election? I'm dying to talk about it. Or do we want to talk about the port strikes, which seems nobody knows about? I mean, I didn't even know about it. You had to tell me.
It's interesting, isn't it? Well, we can talk politics. And by the way, I think the pork strikes are a little bit of politics. You know, why isn't mainstream media talking about it? It's a big deal. But let's kick off with the U.S. election because Trump, our new president. What's your thoughts, JG?
Well, it's fascinating. You know, it's been such a show to watch this unfold south of the border. And you know what I find fascinating? I guess I'm going to start with like the reaction to him becoming the president again for the second time. By the way, this is only the second time ever this has happened, right, Patrick? Where someone was the president, didn't get reelected, 4 years later, then got reelected. This has only ever happened twice. And I think the last time it happened, it was like in the 1800s, like 1880s or something like that. I forget the gentleman's name, but pretty fascinating. This has only ever happened twice in U.S. history. And people's reactions have been quite interesting. And I found it to be very, very polarizing, as is not really surprising. But some are just losing their noodles over this. And then you've seen by the reaction in the markets, by the reaction in Bitcoin, by the reaction in much of many sectors, people are really, really excited by it. And what I am really glad that it happened is it was a sweeping victory. There was no debate here. It was very clear what people wanted, and I think that that's great.
Well, you know, there's what they're calling a market melt up. Of course, all assets are rising, going harder because Trump is in there. But let's be clear on something. You know, whether you're a fan of Trump and who he is and how he is, you know, regardless of that. Now, I've been following Trump for a number of years, but as importantly, what he did was he surrounded himself with what I'm calling an A team. I mean, everything from JD Vance to Tulsi to Vivek. I mean, gosh, he's got a dream team. Add to that Elon Musk. What you've got is a number of what I'm going to refer to as very successful, compassionate capitalists who have run multi-billion dollar businesses, understand the cost of bureaucracy, understand the cost of politics. I think we're going from that extreme left thought process somewhere hopefully back to what I would consider center. And JG, you like me, we're both capitalists. We're a little bit libertarian, but ultimately we're very compassionate. It's not that we don't want social programs. It's not that we don't think that people need to get looked after. There's certainly sectors that do, but it's time. We got to get back to some kind of normalcy and really, like it or not, the US president is a big deal. You can actually kind of say he's really the president in some respects of the world because what he does affects multi countries, and Canada, of course, as our biggest trading partner, really affects us. And I'll just end with this little concern. Trudeau, Freeland, incompetent at every level. They've been trash talking Trump for 4 years, certainly the past year, around their narrative and their script to trash talk Polyev. They're so freaking stupid. I can't even believe it. It makes me nuts. So they've trash talked them, and now they got to sit across the negotiating table from them. You know, the good news is Trump loves Canada. Musk loves Canada. They just don't love Trump, and that's going to cost us. So that's all to say.
They don't love Trudeau, you mean?
Or sorry, they don't love Trudeau. So the next year is going to be, unless there's an early election, we're in for some pain. And that's really my kind of broad overview of what's going on.
Well, that's interesting. Let's dive into that. Let's actually double click on that, Patrick, which is, I think with regards to that, hopefully you're right. We'll have an election in a year. Hopefully we have an early election. But if we don't, I think Trump's got a lot to do at home before he focuses his efforts. And I think he's got a lot of bigger fish to fry than anything that's Canada related. I don't see a whole lot of changes right away on the Canadian side, but over the course of 4 years, there will be, which is why we definitely need some new representation and some stronger leadership on our side. There's no doubt about that. Now, what do you think about, assuming Polyev gets in, let's hope. How do you think that's going to go with Trump? You think there's going to be some good cooperation there?
Well, he's already stated that he's a fan of Trump. He has actually made some comments. And I think it's going to happen quicker than we think. There's a fundamental that we've become really complacent, or I want to say used to. We've normalized the fact that government usually takes so long to do everything, the multiple layers of bureaucracy. He's made it very clear. Now let's go back. You've got Vivek and Elon Musk, JD Vance, but let's just talk about Vivek and Musk. These are guys that move fast. I mean, imagine when Musk walked into Twitter and lays off 80% of his staff, the bureaucracy of his staff, like literally within what? A week. So they're already moving fast. I mean, you start to see the announcement they're making, and he isn't even in as president yet. And so I think that we're going to be on the card way sooner, and that's going to look, because of steel, because of cars, it's going to affect us in a lot of ways with our trade. Now, there's going to be some limitations to what he can do, but our tariffs going to be a thing. Probably. My point is that I think it's going to happen quicker than we think. And we don't have the team that can sit down across the negotiating table from a Trump and actually work out a deal that makes sense. They're far too arrogant to do that. We'll see. Time will tell. But man, I sure don't have any confidence in it.
Well, it's funny because the general kind of feeling of going into the election compared to where we are today, and of course, Patrick, we're only getting kind of our side of it, if you will. I'm sure there's a whole other side we're not seeing. Mainstream media is pushing, or I guess we're going to call legacy media, is pushing a certain narrative that is certainly not gaining any traction. But it's not because they haven't tried.
Oh my gosh, and they ever try to push that narrative hard.
I am very inspired, and I want to touch on this before we move on to the next topic. I'm inspired that I feel this is the beginning of a cultural shift, and I'll tell you what I mean by that specifically, Patrick. And I hope that this comes to Canada too. We both countries, Canada and the U.S., we're heading down this path where we're demonizing success, we're demonizing achievements. We are, people are actually scared to be successful nowadays, and people don't want to be successful, and people don't want to try and don't want to go above and beyond. And I find that a very, very dangerous place to be. And I kind of feel like some of that is coming back to the U.S. now. And I don't care if it's Trump at the helm of it. I certainly don't think the Democrats were doing a very good job of promoting that. I think they were promoting the opposite, which is why they certainly wouldn't have got my vote. But Trump or no Trump, the point is that is very important to the world, but it's also very important to us as their closest allies and their closest neighbors, that we want to push people to be successful. We want people to push themselves to be successful, and that we all rise up. And really, we were heading down the opposite path. And I'm curious to see if this is a change of culture. It feels like it to me right now, but we'll see. Time will tell.
I think this will drive it for sure. And there's going to be a lot more courage. People will start to stand up and step up a lot more, get more vocal. I'm already seeing it. Mainstream media doesn't have the impact it once did. Very few people, relatively speaking, are watching mainstream media anymore. They are going to YouTube. They are going to Twitter. They are going to BitChute or whatever it is. They're going to other platforms where they can get the uncensored version of what's happening. Let's face it, mainstream media or legacy media, whatever you want to refer to it as, they are scripted. They're reading all of the same scripts. You can't go from CBC to Global and get a different story. As a matter of fact, if you sometimes bring them together, it's literally the same script. It's all to say this: people are finally starting to see the shift or have a shift. And Canada's going to lag behind the U.S. I think the U.S. will lead the way in that kind of narrative, in the change of narrative. Canada has to get behind the entrepreneur, the small, medium enterprises. We need to get productive again. And I think that definitely the U.S. will lead the way in that regard. Our current government will and has proven to be those individuals that continue to drive bureaucracy, they continue to put layers of public sector in there, and we're just not being productive, and it's going to start to show up economically. I think you're going to see a polar opposite of that shift into the US. That is definitely, I'm hopeful that will bleed into Canada, and we'll start to see that in order to drive an economy to get back to some form of prosperity that isn't just about consumerism and real estate, we are going to get small business activated again. That's what I'm hoping. But we've got a few years ahead of us. It's going to be uncomfortable, and it's probably going to be very frustrating as we go through the politics.
I think I'll tell you, I got a couple more questions on this, Patrick, and I just want to dive deep. I know a lot of people, I know that you're quite political. A lot of people have questions and want to know your thoughts. So I'm gonna push you on a couple different other questions here. But before we go there, what I find fascinating is he's only got 4 years. He doesn't have a second term. So I do agree with you that, albeit I think Canada's not necessarily high on his list of priorities. I think he's got a lot of priorities that he's got to do, and they're all internally related mostly. But I do think he's going to come out swinging really hard, because I think he has a limited amount of time where essentially a huge percentage of the country is behind him right now. And he will only, at some point, just like every other presidency, their approval rating is really, really high. Then it starts to slow down, and then it drags over time. It's rare that most presidencies kind of get stronger over 4 years. They go through this kind of lull. He's going to come out swinging, I think, in the first, call it 6 months, call it 1 year. I don't know how long, but he's going to come out swinging, trying to do as much as he possibly can, because he's only got 4 years. After that, it's done. It's over. He's never getting back in again. So I think he's going to do as much as possible, and he's going to be concerned about, after that.
Yeah, well, don't be surprised if an Elon Musk comes up and all of a sudden he's a contender for being the next president. But that's a different conversation. Let me point out a couple things. Again, I want to go back to whether you like Trump or not. I think he surrounded himself with an A team. As I've really followed and watched his long interviews, whether it be with Rogan or Tucker Carlson, Dr. Phil, he's been on a lot of podcasts, and that's just to name 3 that come to the top of my mind. I've watched a lot. So I start to see Patrick Bet-David did a great interview with him. So I've really watched a lot, all of these guys. And I got to say that they show up way different. And when you get into that long format interview rather than the 4-minute sound bites or the 3-minute sound bites, you start to see who these individuals are. I want to point this out, though. I can't stress enough. Individuals aside, this is really a question of policy. And I think what the people said was, and because Trump was very vocal about it, they are voting for the policies that Trump is speaking of and talking about. As much as they're voting for Trump, they are in fact voting for a shift in policies. This is the fundamental difference that we have. I got to be honest, I'm a fan of Polyev, but Polyev is not a business guy. He doesn't have a background. He's not particularly business savvy, I don't think. So my concern is that, yes, we'll vote the player called Polyev because he talks common sense. He has all the right sound bites. He says all the right things. He pushes back against Trudeau a lot. Here's my concern. I don't know if he can pull off the policies, and has he really stepped up and started talking about policy? Some of it he has, and I'm excited about it, but then he has to be able to execute. That's my concern. The one thing we know about the A team that Trump's got, they execute. They pull shit off.
This is my question. So I'm gonna ask you the question. I'm gonna make a couple statements, and I'll come back to the question. But I want to get from you, Patrick, what do you think were because it was a close race there for a while, that's for sure. After the hot swap and so on and so forth. But I want to know what you think were the turning points and some of the kind of key critical things that Trump did do. Just because I think I think people could learn from this in general. So I'm going to come back to that question in a second, but start thinking about that. What I want to encourage people, and the thing that one of the turning points for me, and I think, and I want to put this out there because, the 16 people that are going to watch this episode, because I think we have 16 or 17 viewers now, which is great. Thank you, by the way, you 16, like Cody and Sandy. I know they're always watching. But my point is this: I encourage people to not get caught up in your past views and to be open to the possibility of changing your mind. And that's one of the biggest things that I think Trump did well this time, is if you were open to going to do your own research and not listening to legacy media, and you were open to listening to him on Rogan or on X or on somewhere else that's not legacy media, you got a completely different Trump. And you can remove the word Trump from it. You got a completely different person there. And I think the new forms of media these new forms of media that have only been around for 20, 30 years, they're not exactly new, but this long form podcast content, for example, where he was able to appear for 2, 3, 4 hours in some cases, was quite impactful. I think number one, it was a turning point for his campaign. But I think number two is I encourage people watching this that because when we come to our election, hopefully our candidates will do some long form content. And I encourage people to go outside of legacy media to get to know these people by listening to long form content like podcasts, YouTube videos, and so on and so forth. And I think that was a critical component to not only him changing a lot of people's minds, but also us seeing a different version of him.
100%. And let's face it, what he's done is he's bringing us back with some of his policies. Of course, he's changing what they're doing within their education system. He's changing what they're doing, like in terms of what they teach within the schools. He's taking the whole, I don't even know what the term is, this whole thing of sex change or transitioning or whatever the term is. He's taking that off the table for children under 18 years old and 16 years old. There's some protocols there that he's putting in place. Again, strong policies around our families, around our kids. He's talking about tariffs. He's wanting to bring productivity back into the U.S. He already said once, and I'm going to find the clip again, he said, the first day I'm president, I'm signing off on the pipeline. So we know that the pipeline at this point, he has said, is going to go forward. So that is something else that affects Canada. Where we're going to get beat up, perhaps, is in our steel as an example. They're going to have to negotiate well on that, and as well on our soft lumber. So we have to look at the business that we do with them. Those are just a couple of aspects. Canada has a chance to really lead the way in so many ways. Commodities aside, we can also lead the way in terms of our tech industry and grow our tech industry. This, again, is about, do we have the leadership to step up, sit across a negotiating table from the Trump team and actually pitch Canada for what we can do? Can we be good partners that supports each other economically and negotiate the deal? Trump's going to come in heavy-handed, and he doesn't trust Trudeau. He said that straight up. He actually talks about the time that they sat down, they did a deal. I don't remember what the deal was, doesn't matter. They shake hands on it, they walk away. He literally walks into his office where there's, or whatever office it was, where there's 15 screens, and there's Trudeau absolutely bashing the conversation that they just had. I mean, Trudeau's off the table for Trump. He has no respect for him. And I think we're going to pay we are 100% going to pay a price for that. We'll just see how much damage.
Well, hopefully he's not in there very long, Patrick. That's the only thing we can hope for at this point. But I will say this, because you're bringing up some interesting points, and there's a lot of people that are scared of this stuff. By the way, I'm hearing. It's funny because I'm hearing some people that are really creating a lot of fears. They're literally creating fears for themselves around a lot of this stuff. But it could go the other way, right? You've said it how many times, Patrick, that Canada is extremely rich in natural resources, extremely rich in a lot of resources, and we just got to do a better job at selling it. And if we can, and guess what? One of the largest consumers of these resources is just south of the border, and they need them all. So there's no reason we can't increase productivity, increase GDP, increase exports in a big, big way if we can get to that. So I think people, that is a possibility, assuming, of course, we need good representation and so on and so forth, but that is a possibility.
Well, 100%. We just don't have the leadership. That's the problem that we face, is that we don't have the leadership that can actually take us through that whole process. And people in general aren't understanding the fact that, they want government to save them, and they're using our tax dollars. They're spending it in a way that most don't want it spent. And they're increasing, again, that middle bureaucracy, that public sector, which is not
Do you think, though, this may be, I'm hoping, now this is JG's rose-colored glasses, but I'm hoping that south of the border, they end up reducing the government footprint in a big, big way with, Elon giving them a hand. And if they can do that, it will set a new precedent and a new standard, because the whole standard, it's not just us, buddy. It's not just the US. The entire government machine is going in that direction. And I'm hoping that we can now change that. and hopefully we can learn from our partners south of the border.
Musk has made it very clear. He's already said they're going to be letting a lot of their public sector go. They're going to pay them. They're going to give them 2 years notice, pay them for the next couple of years because they're going to have to go out and find jobs. They're not trying to be harsh or cruel, but they're going, you got to go. There is no use for you anymore. Go find a real job, which then will hopefully lead to productivity. So by taking this public sector, their public sector, pushing it out into the private sector, there's going to be more productivity. It's all part of a bigger picture. And so I think there's a fundamental around all of this, JG, that this may sound like, to your point, people are afraid. But this goes back to what we need to talk about, which is the real estate part of the world, or our conversation around real estate, where real estate is a store of value. We're actually investing in real estate for in some ways, a whole different reason. It used to be to create wealth, have a financial future, which still remains, but now it's almost like a case of survival. We need to get our capital placed in stores of value, real estate being one of them, because what's going to happen is the effect on the Canadian dollar and the US dollar and the actual breakdown, if you will, of fiat currency, which will happen over the course of several years. But at the end of the day, you need to get into real estate. This uncertainty, this confusion is where opportunity lives. Everybody wants to chase the shiny thing and the next hot thing. And we can see that in Bitcoin, for example. I'm a big Bitcoin fan, by the way, but it's also a statement of where people get into FOMO and they rush to this. Having said that, Bitcoin is a store of value. All to say that people are looking to put the capital, follow the money. And the money is going into real estate, it's going into Bitcoin, it's going into precious metals. Follow the money. And the opportunities exist for those who have the courage to look into what's going on economically and then take advantage of it.
The last, I agree, Patrick. We're going to talk Bitcoin. We're going to talk more real estate. The last thing I'll say on this is with regards to the election is I think another game changer, and I didn't get your moments where you thought they were essentially game changers or turning points for the Republicans. But I will say this, the concept of the way that he's built the team around him this time around was quite genius. And especially the people that rallied around him was pretty incredible. If you think about Bobby Kennedy, if you think about Elon, if you think about some of those people that Vivek is interesting, but Vivek was a nobody until he started running. I mean, you had never heard of Vivek. I mean, I understand he's done big things.
That's not true.
I understand he's done big things. I get it. But to the general, he was a nobody. Now it turns out when he got into in the limelight, holy shit, he is a somebody. I get that. And I'm a big fan of Vivek. I think he's quite fascinating. His thought process is very interesting. But the way he's built that team around him, incredible. And I think that's going to be a game changer for politicians in the future and how they get elected.
So turning point was putting that A team together. And I forgot to even mention Kennedy. That is a huge turning point. It's like making America healthy again. And as you know, I'm pretty much a health fan. I do a lot of study of that. It's one of my higher values is health, because I think that not only as an individual, but as a country, we need to be healthy. And ultimately think about the healthcare costs. As much as we complain about healthcare, don't even get me started, because a lot of the healthcare and a lot of what we're putting in and what we have to do within the healthcare system is because people are not eating well. They're not looking after themselves well. So I don't want to go down that path. The point is this: that was a turning point for the Republicans when they brought Kennedy on, when they brought Musk on, when they brought Vivek in, when they started putting this team together. People could see this is real change. This isn't this isn't bringing a bunch of good buddies in and doing the politics game. This is, you need to shift policy around making America healthy again. Carte blanche, get done what you get done. And I forget who he put in place for the border control, but that guy is a piece of work. I don't remember his last name, but holy cow, I've listened to him. These guys are hard asses. They're not putting up with anything. And I love it. I think it's where we got to go.
It's interesting, and time will tell. Where this isn't the last time we talk about this, Patrick. It's only the first time, and it's going to get interesting. And the show continues. That's all I'll say.
So if you like these episodes and you want to learn more about what's going on with real estate in Canada, investing in real estate, and understanding how to invest in real estate the right way, head on down to the descriptions below, follow those links.